All right. Well, so welcome to our discussion. In addition to the speakers that you have already heard, we have here two speakers also from this afternoon, Leonore van Sloten and Marieke de Winkel. So I'd like to start our discussion by asking the question to any of you who would like to address this. But I'm actually going to address it to begin with to Rudy. Excluding your own work, what do you think is the most important development, or an important development, in our understanding of the 17th century Dutch portrait in the last 50 years?
Well, for me, a great moment has been Eddie de Jong's Portretten van Echt en Trouw, since they gave an historic and social connection to portraiture. And I think not only my vision, but also vision of many other people have been influenced by that publication.
Well, I fully agree. Working in the Amsterdam Museum, we are only able to show portraits that have been identified. So rather than concentrating on the brushwork, which is extremely important for attribution issues, of course, we'd like to show our visitors people of flesh and blood with whom you can relate. So that's why we did the exhibition 18 years ago on Amsterdam portraiture between 1600 and 1800. And in this show, as I told at the start, we try to have as many identified persons as possible in order to have a double result, enjoy great art, great portraits, and also try and get to know life, culture, the people of that era a little better. So I fully agree. That's, for me, the most important development in the research on portraiture, Dutch portraiture in general.
Yeah, Marieke, since you and Volker have just finished this monumental re-evaluation and reconsideration of Rembrandt's paintings in general, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that a huge achievement is the rehabilitation, as you like, of the portrait. Many exhibition was considered for a long time as boring. But we as human beings are very alert and trained to look at human faces and try to establish, is that a friend or a foe, or what is behind that face. So therefore, naturally, portraits are very interesting to the general public. And I think that in the past this mistake was made that portraits were seen as boring. And they become less and less boring if you understand the context and the function in which they were made. So the commemorative function of, I looked like this when I was young or old or when I married, but also understand things that were so typical for the age, like how did mourning work, how did those place those portraits in the whole cultural context. And I think that has been the greatest achievement of the last decades for the study of portraiture.
Yeah, very nice. Context, I think, is really valuable here. Volker, did you have anything to add to that?
I certainly agree. I think that the results that have been produced within the last, let's say, 50 years contribute a lot to, and go far beyond just like purely our understanding of portraits in the 17th century. There are so many implications of what we have to realize when, after identifying the sitters, after putting the paintings in an art historical context, and all these implications, historical implications, socio-economical implications, material aspects of material culture, of the history of collecting, questions of decorum. So there's a lot of things that go beyond the, let's say, the rather traditional way of saying, well, either we look at the painting from the stylistic point of view or from the point of who were actually the sitters. It's a rather incredible, and this is something you can see when you look at this exhibition. It's a really kind of complex whole.
Thank you. Lenore, could I put you on the spot? Since you're a scholar of the graphic arts, drawing and prints, are there any particular developments that you have found stimulating, exciting, interesting in that field?
What I think, if I look at this exhibition and how we are here together, and so many other people have been involved in the past decades in researching this group of paintings and prints and drawings, it shows how important it is to understand portraits, to combine so many different specialties. Archival research. I think portraits are amongst the most complicated groups of artworks to understand and to really identify, because you need to understand the sources where paintings have been mentioned, of course also stylistic research, but also the recent exhibition in Enschede, which showed how, for example, in family portraits, children can have been painted away. You need technical research to understand what the genesis and the development of an artwork has been, to understand who we are looking at. And once you understand who you're looking at, a world opens, and that is where my museum comes in, a museum which is all about context, the house of the artist where he lived and worked, and of course the neighborhood, the city in which he functioned. And then to make exhibitions, for example, and publications on networks, on relationships, so then it grows, and then your understanding becomes much better of this world.
Thank you. Well, Bas, Lenore talked about the importance of archival research, and you've been involved in that for the last 60 years.
Yes.
Are there any particular developments recently that you find of interest or stimulating?
Well, we had to do our research 60 years ago all by hand. You were sitting hours there, choosing the right volume to go through it with your finger, and you knew to pick out the words. So the first time, Mrs. van Eghe asked me to help her with the portrait of Andries de Graaf. It was during a coffee break in June 69, that she asked me to write about that portrait, and she had done some pre-work. And being used to the archives and making abstracts from notary publics, I had my first Rembrandt find in an hour in that family. So I was very proud of it, but everything had to be done by hand. But after 60, 80, it all changed, and we had other entries, and you were very clever with the old ways to come to your source, because now you have to type in something and it plops up on all sides. But the other thing, which is for me amazingly, you may be aware that my sight is not that good, that I had to work with very bad photographs of works of art of the 1920s, black and white, badly reproduced, and you could not even see the eyes in the pictures. And I am very interested in the blue eyes of Rembrandt. And now it comes up, and I was helped to prepare this show. It was not what I made myself, but the new generation knows so well to find it. And I can ask the right things, and yes, there it is. And so I think I'm just outliving my time on a very good moment.
Well, I'd like to turn to thinking about the exhibition itself, and to ask each of you, What does an exhibition like this contribute to your personal understanding of Dutch portraiture? And in particular, has the exhibition stimulated any new avenues of research?
Of course.
I'm prejudiced. I think yes, and I hope yes, but I'm prejudiced. So.
Okay, well, I will give you the last word. Bas, I heard, of course.
Working on something for the catalogue, I had some new insight because I was working with Norbert on his thesis, and then I showed him 2 pictures of who are in the show.
Okay, do we need the PowerPoint now?
Yes, they may pop up.
Okay, can we have the PowerPoint here?
And those portraits were amazing because we had a date, etat souhait, on the portraits. And then Norbert found the man with it in his research for his thesis. The dates brought me to the man, and the lady had a date, and I did research in the office chamber, and I found that his date was right, and her date was right as well, but she was not mentioned in the office chamber because she just married the man. But when you looked up the family tree, it was just in 1638, a gap in the family tree in the office chamber where her place had been. So I was rather assured with it. And then I knew we had one of the leaders of Dutch Protestants, not Calvinists, in Amsterdam, and the founder of the Dutch Protestant Church in Amsterdam, living in the harbor and being in exile from 1566 on, and he left a lot of notes. So he was around 1900, very famous in Amsterdam history, and then it stopped. But now he comes back, and the thing is, it's so important that a few houses was living the grandfather of the Graaf family on the same canal of the same congregation, still in 1630s. The eldest daughter married to Arminius, the leader of the Remonstrants. The youngest brother became Governor General of the East Indies. And I think by now that Susanna Moore, the portrait we found of him is an unrestored painting, as this one, very much overpainted. Here he is in the unrestored painting, and I still think this is the same man. But Rudy was very, how do we say, strange.
So skeptical.
Skeptical to me and said, don't publish it, do more research. And I said, I have no time left. I have 6 volumes to publish and my book on the memory paintings. So I'm sorry, 2 paintings I love to do, but I don't do it, but I give a sign. There is a lot about these people, and they are just in the center of the Dutch way of Protestantism, not Calvinism, because they were an aggressive sort of Protestantism, just like ISIS in the East.
So, do any of the others of you have?
Can I just?
Yeah.
Your question about what actually is it that you appreciate when looking at the exhibition upstairs?
Yeah.
I think to me personally, and you ask what we individually think about it. I realized, again, when walking through the different rooms, how important it is, not when you organize an exhibition on portraits, how important it is not just simply like present what the Italians call the pezzi grossissimi, so the top. How important it is to be able to make comparisons to show development, to show before, sometimes even a little later. And that is the reason why this exhibition is just like wonderful. You walk from painting to painting and you realize immediately what happened, what different approaches are, what different artists had to contribute. So you get a full picture of what actually happened in this time. And all of this presented in a wonderful but very modest way. I mean, so that you really can enjoy looking, thinking, walk to the next and see, oh well, 20 years later, this happened within the oeuvre of the same artist or the oeuvre of a different artist. So I think we shouldn't be, too much afraid of illustrating developments, historical changes. Definitely with regard to portraits, it tells a lot. About the individual artist, but as well about the context as a whole.
Thank you.
And
Yes, Lenore.
may I make a plea also for the non-monographic exhibition, but for the exhibitions in which artists are juxtaposed. We try to do the same with Ferdinand Bol and Govert Flinke in Amsterdam, in the Rembrandt House Museum and the Amsterdam Museum. And we also, as curators, noticed how fruitful it is to be able to compare. In our minds, we know that Rembrandt had a different style in his later years than his colleagues. But to see it here in the galleries and to not only see that Rembrandt has makes his own choices and delivers something completely different of an incredible quality and artistic idea, but also to see that the rest is of also a tremendous quality. And that is, I think, made me very happy walking through the galleries and being able to see this diversity.
Norbert, so in putting the exhibition together, are there things that you learned that you might be carrying on for your future research?
Well, the best thing I learned started after the installation was there. Finally, there it was, and it has already been mentioned. It's great to be able to compare, and I think it's been very courageous of this museum to have to want this exhibition. It was a great idea that started here, and I of course feel privileged to have been able to help it realize. I think it's especially great to have it in Madrid and maybe even not in Amsterdam, because the confrontation with Spanish portraiture is quite striking. Of course, this museum and the museum at the opposite side of the road, they have great portraits, also non-Dutch portraits. So to have this huge bulk of portraits mostly of citizens, well-to-do citizens, upper middle class, elite, etc., but even some ordinary folks, all the small paintings here and there, that is the best confrontation you can have. And it says it all about Dutch portraiture, Northern Netherlandish. It's a different kind of clientele. And I think the success of that genre, the Dutch portraiture, is also due to the sitters. For the museum visitor, it's quite easy to relate to the carpenter on that painting, or to the merchant on that painting, and of course to the lady governor on another one. And still, you want to know more about their lives, because maybe if I would have lived in the 17th century, I might have led a similar life. So it's great art to bridge gaps between two completely different ages. And of course, we have to underline the ages were very different, and we are the happy witnesses to. We can share it, we can enjoy it, and the show proves one thing, that portraiture is not boring at all. No, on the contrary, it's most exciting stuff. Because of the eyes, we are looking at them, but they are looking at us.
And if I can make another plea, what I liked about the exhibition was that it often said, so-and-so, a brewer. And you say, oh, does he look like a brewer? But that's not common, that you have his professions written on the notes. And that also proves the great importance of identifications, because you don't see that here, but there has been discussion that the identification is not really relevant. In the book by Harry Berger, for instance, he says, "Oh, I don't care about identifications because I look at it as an object of beauty, and for me that's only that's not relevant." But the only way to find out about context and networks, for instance, is if you have a very good identification. And I also like the way that it has been done. It's not like this is so and so, but most of the times it's possibly or probably. So I think I like that as well.
So this is a more difficult question, I think, but I'd like to ask, what can an exhibition of this not do?
Well, we cannot solve all problems of identifications and attributions. And let's not forget, there's a nice bunch of early Rembrandt portraits, and there's been a lot of discussion about attribution issues. Workshop, one hand, 50 pupils in the 1630s. Well, maybe that's too much. But who was responsible for what painting or what part of the painting? This exhibition at least gives you the opportunity to compare and make up your mind. So we cannot solve all problems, but that's why we should go to exhibitions like this, or I'm Prejudiced, and not only look at the screen here, because you can really look at the originals and start a discussion standing side by side opposite the objects. So it's also an invitation to go ahead with the research, and of course for the visitors to then go to the permanent collection and to the other side of the road to see other portraits and start relating to those. Sorry, that is what the exhibition can do. That was not your question. I'm positive.
I think what the exhibition cannot do, and not only this exhibition, is something that I think we all really miss, but there's hardly anything we can do about it. What I would like to know is what kind of dialogues, what kind of conversations people who commissioned portraits from 17th century, 16th, 17th century artists, what was the contents of these conversations? Because there are no contracts, hardly any contracts. It must have gone like this. I mean, you visit the artist, you say, well, you know, I like these portraits I've seen around the corner with my friend, and do it. I mean, I'm going to marry 3 months from now. I want 2 portraits, one of myself and one of my wife. What else did they discuss? What happened? What was the influence of the one who commissioned when talking, for example, to Rembrandt? Would he or she would have dared to say, you know, please take care of this or take care of that. I don't want to look like so. Or was it all? Please, I mean, we want these 2 portraits, and I'm going to pay you, and it would be nice to have them a year from now. And Rembrandt would say, I'll do my best. That's about it. We know that he wasn't kind of easy to deal with. I mean, there were complaints about likeness in some of his portraits, because the ones who commissioned these portraits were not happy. And he, at least from 1 or 2 examples, we know he acted in a rather arrogant way, saying, you know, you have no idea what likeness is. I'm going to decide this. You pay first what we have discussed, then I will think about it. And if you're not happy with it, I'm going to ask my brothers in the Guild of the Painters to say whether this is good or not. And if you're still not happy, I'm going to sell you. And I mean, this is remarkable. I'm going to sell this portrait that you commissioned. Somebody who Rembrandt was not familiar with. He had the kind of, you know, standing and the kind of reputation that he could easily sell this as a product of his own hand without taking care of or looking who is the sitter. So this is something the exhibition cannot do. What went on when the one who commissioned talked to the artist? I mean, I would love to know about this.
This brings to mind, this may be completely apocryphal, but when I was a student, I heard that Mrs. Van Eycken came into the archive one day and said that, told her assistants, when I come in and say that Rembrandt has just spoken to me, please, that's time to retire me.
Yes. Oh, that was rather difficult. When she left the archive, she said to me, when I have found the daily papers of Rembrandt, be aware that something is very wrong. When the moment came that she was engaged to a painter, there we had it, and she would not hear us. And she published her publications, not in Amsterdam, but in the daily newspaper. So that was rather dangerous, and I hope I will not end up that way.
No?
Really, maybe you can add about the relationship between Hooft and the painter Miereveld. The portrait is in the show.
Yes, it's interesting. We have the portrait of the poet and politician Hooft in the exhibition, painted by Michiel van Miereveld, and there is some correspondence between sitter and painter.
Wow.
The interesting thing is Hooft has been to Delft to pose for Miereveld, and then we see that it took a very long time before he heard again, and then he is writing to Miereveld about that. Unfortunately, he is not saying so much about how he wanted the portrait to be made. That's, I would have liked something more about that, but at least it's one of the direct things we have about between sitter and artist. And all these things are so rare. What was just said, mostly we have some information when they quarreled about, mostly about the payment of paintings, and we always have to look for the very tiny indications about relations. For example, a few months ago, I noticed in the diaries of the Frisian stadtholder Willem Frederik that where he noted that he sat for Wieband de Geest, the Leeuwarden court painter, and after that they got to lunch together. That was interesting thing to know about the relation between such a painter and his princely model.
Yeah, fascinating.
So, these are the very tiny indications, but I think you have to collect through decades all those indications to come to some conclusions.
And we have, as you will well know, Lou Fredericks twice in the show, painted by Thomas de Keyser. With a clear relationship to the painter, between the sitter and the painter.
Brother-in-law. Yeah, so my last question does come from the perspective of being someone who works primarily not on Rembrandt, but on a contemporary painter, Thomas de Keyser. And this is perhaps heretical here, but I want to ask, how has a focus on Rembrandt shaped or possibly even distorted our understanding of Dutch portraiture?
Of Dutch portraiture or of Thomas de Keyser?
Dutch portraiture.
Well, when I'm allowed to give a first answer, I think that the concentration on Rembrandt has damaged the possibilities to discover other Dutch portraitists. And it's always the general attitude is always, well, of course, you had the Rembrandt pupils who followed Rembrandt, and then when they got independence from Rembrandt's example, it was not the real way. There was some esteem for later work, but not comparable to Rembrandt. And what I think is very important, the general idea that Rembrandt came from nowhere, and there was no Amsterdam portraiture before Rembrandt, I think, and of course we try to note also in the catalogue that Rembrandt really used all kinds of work of his predecessors, including Thomas de Keyser. And it's not a complete revolution, but he built on with his own qualities and the qualities of his work, but he couldn't do without his predecessors.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, I'm very happy that the portrait prints are included in the exhibition, because they're so important. In general, in the production of portraits in the 17th century, they're not as etchings but as engravings. I will be talking about that later this afternoon. But so Rembrandt, as a producer of portrait prints, could have had more context in that sense, but that would be a whole exhibition in itself. So that's a limitation of what is on show now. Standing in the last room, in front of a number of these portraits, you can really see that Rembrandt was very aware of traditions and forms in which earlier generations had presented their works, their portraits. And I think a wonderful example is the posthumous portrait of Johannes Sylvius, a family member of Rembrandt, which is done in the etching in a very masterly way of bringing out the hand, the man protruding from an illusion of an oval, and his hand is coming forward with a beautiful shadow also casting on that oval. And if you then would walk back to the first room, you would see the earliest example in the whole contest of the portrait of our important composer, Sweelinck, painted by the grandfather teacher of Rembrandt. So the teacher of the teacher of Rembrandt. So that is a wonderful bow. That's one example of a wonderful bow of relationships within what is shown.
Yep.
Full circle.
Yeah. Thank you very much.